is my pleasure to welcome my fellow Montrealais, my fellow Montrealer, Québécois, Canadien, now in Kiwiland, New Zealand. Henri, bienvenue.
Bonjour, lovely to be here.
No, it's always a pleasure. And you're looking good. And I'm assuming family's all well.
Yeah, they're all good. The eldest university engineering, the other one's final year of high school. The wife's happy. The dog's good. The dog barks in the background. You'll understand. And working today. It's a long weekend from tomorrow. It's a long weekend here, which is good. I guess Easter weekend. So
it's Easter. That's right. That's right.
And the weather's still very nice, and we're very happy. So far, so good here.
Love it. Love it. Well, it's great. You know, we're bringing back select leaders who care. And based on how I described you at the beginning, that makes you very selective as well to bring you back for a revisit. And, you know, it's interesting to tell the audience, we were just talking, how cool would it be if we did these revisits, like let's say every 10 years also, and see where everybody is and how they're doing. We may just take that on. So we have to keep in touch then for the next 50 years so we can do that.
Oh. Well, we've known each other virtually for years. Yes. Right? And when you think about it, we were destined to be friends through Zoom or through COVID, I mean, via Zoom. But when we meet in person, it'll be very strange. So no, that'll be fun.
Well, I won't waste too much time. I had a client once that there was a growing CA or CPA firm, and long story short, the managing partner and I, we were doing a lot of business together, but our breakfast and lunch meetings, we always got delayed for some reason. I met almost everybody in the firm. Finally, I said, Jim, this is ridiculous. We're doing all this work. We still haven't met. He said, Mark, don't spoil a good thing. So I said, great, Jim, thanks a lot. But that won't be the case. So
we'll be having drinks and going for hours, I'm sure. I look forward
and
to
having a good hug, which I really miss the hugging part. So this is a revisit, and basically we're asking people, and I'd love to know from you, number one, you know, how did you complete, even though some people would think 2020 is not even complete yet, but how did you complete 2020 personal, business-wise, and what's 2021 looking like?
So it's interesting. I guess if you go back to January 2020, I was in Los Angeles, and I think you were probably in Europe. And you know, when I first got the news of this, I thought, okay, doesn't sound great, but we'll see what happens. And then suddenly it's March 2020. And as a small little nation, 2 rocks at the end of the world, in New Zealand, we went into lockdown, sort of stunned the world that we just shut our borders for, I think, about 6 weeks. And we all stayed home for 6 weeks. So I think the first thought I had was, okay, great, there'll be a slowdown. Let's sort of think about growing the veggie garden and the fruit and you know, stock up on toilet paper and so on and so forth. But nobody panicked, which was good. From a business perspective, governance became top of mind. So I was never busier. Actually, during lockdown, I worked nonstop between board meetings, client advisory, and the like. So that side of things has been great, may continue. On a family side, it was brilliant because I used to travel a lot internationally throughout the year. It was an opportunity for us all to catch up in the morning, lunchtime, in the evening. We watched a lot of video streaming movies. And as a family, we reconnected. So that was great bonding. And we hadn't done that probably in 10 years, the way we did in 2020. And then I guess the way the year ended was sort of like we all needed a big holiday. Even though we had a few lockdowns throughout the year, we didn't have it as bad as a lot of other places in the world. You suffered pretty badly in Los Angeles, I know, and France is another lockdown again today, across the whole nation. So we feel very blessed, but we also recognize that it's not over yet. So I look at 2020 as year 1, 2021 is year 2, and I hope that year 3 is just the beginning of a bit of a new normal where we can go forward and lots of hugs and seeing people and traveling. But I'm also very realistic that you still have to be careful. I think the world has changed fundamentally, and I'd love to say that we're going to be the roaring 20s that I read about in the 1920s. It's very possible. Then I'm probably going to be a bit concerned about 2030, but you know, we'll worry about that when we get to that stage of life.
Well, before you get to 2021, you said there's a lot of board stuff happening even in 2020. Why? Tell me what made that happen.
So I think 3 things occurred. First of all, the unknown and no one was prepared for it. Therefore, everyone looked around the boardroom table to see, who understood supply chain logistics. So putting aside the Suez Canal that we were all witnessed this past week, but we looked at, do we have enough inventory if we're a manufacturer? If we are exporting, we'll be able to export air, freight. How will that work? Will we be able to continue to manufacture? Can our people work? How will they work remotely? So the second was IT. Do we have the right information technology in place for remote working? Were our contingency plans effective or not? And I think what happened is, and the third one is I think a lot of boards were getting stale, and they sort of started to panic, and they started to think, well, we need to change our approach to governance and actually be more agile. That as a board, we're going to meet via Zoom or similar technology daily initially, and then weekly. So the approach to typical governance changed overnight. I think the other thing that happened as well is a number of our clients started saying we need to add and replace some of our directors that are out of touch, and we want people with the right experience, supply chain logistics, information technology, strategy, innovation, etc. And even within the health sector, for people and culture, we wanted to understand people and culture from a health perspective, i.e. in respect to a pandemic, and how do we protect our staff accordingly. And a lot of boards were taken off guard and had no one around the table to deal with this, unless you were probably a hospital board or a medical insurance board or medical device manufacturer. And I think I'll add a quick little bonus thing there is that I also noticed some businesses boomed during COVID, and they weren't prepared for that either. I know one case, they doubled sales in the first week for the month. So in 1 week, they had doubled sales for the whole month. So you can do the math on that one. And then they ended up their financial year end, which closed yesterday, they were up 210% on the previous year, which is unheard of in their industry. And what they provide is a luxury item. So we were thinking, what were people thinking? Well, they wanted to just do stuff because they were at home, which is normal.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because it's like eating comfort food, if you will. When you're feeling, and the luxury item becomes the comfort food if you can afford it. And I think some people made mistakes early on by showing how bad it was that they were in lockdown on their yacht and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's not good.
Which wasn't too smart. So leaving 2020, going into 2021, we've talked about this even just before this, but even before, governance became more important, you told me, for boards.
Yes.
Talk about that.
So it became important in respect to providing the right level of support to the CEO and their team. The governors became more active strategically, and the focus on compliance was always important, but the 80-20 rule came into play, which is best practice, forward thinking, looking ahead. So with refreshing some of the boards, they woke up to pretty much a bit of a steady as it goes. It's quite easy to get lazy and relax. And actually, you have to actually work hard in a part-time role and live and breathe the organization, and think about them all the time. But recognize when you're in the boardroom, that's critical. But when you're outside the boardroom, you have to think about them as well. So I think the role of directors changed overnight. They woke up to a very easy state for some of them to, wow, we're in a crisis here, especially companies that were in tourism, airlines. We know those boards change. So in the case of Air New Zealand, the whole board is different now, bar I think one member from what they had a year ago. Wow. The whole executive leadership team, I think, is different, bar one person as well, with a new CEO on board just as it started as well. So that's pretty scary. Yeah. So like Greg Foran, who was CEO of Walmart USA. So we had a Kiwi expat return to New Zealand. What a bit of a present for him, but he's weathering the storm, pardon the pun. And I just got off a flight last night from Wellington, which is just an hour from Auckland. The flight was full. All the flights were full. So domestic travel is very, very busy in New Zealand because you can't go anywhere, and people are returning to having face-to-face meetings as much as possible where it's required. But I also recognize that boards are happy to meet with a mixture of video technology and face-to-face. But as you and I know well, nothing beats a face-to-face meeting. I think if you know someone, you can do this. But if you've never met them, or it's a very important meeting that goes on for hours, it's very hard to be sitting in front of a screen for hours on end.
Yeah, no end. No doubt. There's just something about the physiological, mental, everything that goes into that. Having dinner together, whatever. Things like that. Did you find anything with boards that they put more emphasis on? I don't want to just say ESG, but they put more emphasis on in two parts: just having positive impact on their local community and global community, but also that it is better for business, especially if they can show that they cared during the hard times. Then when it gets better, people will realize and recognize them.
If you think about your theme and that you guys are doing a great job around leaders who care, I've noticed that the role of the board around an organization becoming purpose driven is more apparent today. I think publishing an ESG statement is one thing, that's paperwork. What's happening is they act that way. So more directors are behaving around how do we actually as an organization have a purpose, even if we're a listed company or private, to think about sustainability, to think about the health and well-being of our people. And without good people, we won't have a business. But actually, if we don't take care of the environment as well, we actually won't have a planet. Therefore, we'll have none of anything. Right. So I think more leaders today, and definitely driven through the chair initially and the rest of the board, and then the management team, is we actually have to think about our environment, we have to think about sustainability, and we have to think about governance. And if we do all those three hand in hand, but be progressive, will do well. I mean, the classic example has always been Patagonia, right? And they've had an edge up by being a private company, so you can do what you want within reason. Right. But that was a classic example during the first major lockdown last March 2020, is we will continue to pay our employees. I mean, that cost them a lot of money. They could afford it, maybe. On the other hand, they didn't have to. So it's about stakeholder capitalism today, not about typical agency theory of shareholder wealth. No, it's actually about everyone doing well. Because if we have a huge imbalance in society, we all lose in the end.
Yeah, there's no doubt. We've talked a little bit about this too before we complete. Obviously, U.S. is very diverse because it's very big. How does diversity, equity, inclusion, racism, or whatnot fit into the play of who's on the board, but also how leaders of companies address it?
So, for example, in New Zealand, if you're a crown entity, so if you're a board that's owned by the government, there's a requirement for diversity of thought around the table, which is gender, age, and ethnicity. And particularly gender and ethnicity is a critical element within for the Maori economy as our Indigenous people, but as well as having more women around the boardroom table. It's been proven through research and also facts is that having diversity around the table, you actually have a more effective board. You avoid groupthink. I think we've seen it also around the people and culture approach in the organization from a leadership perspective, where the board looks to the CEO and their team to talk through a deep dive on what is our diversity ratio here, how many men, how many women, how many people are from LGBTQ, etc. in our organization. Are we promoting people into leadership roles and not the typical bastion of you're male, therefore you're going to be in the executive team, which is wrong. Right. So I think we're seeing more inclusion occur. I think there will be some organizations that fall behind the times and don't keep up with that. Well, they probably won't be around in 5 years. The organizations that embrace diversity and inclusion will be successful because you'll want to work there, you'll want to buy from them, you want to engage with them, and you'll admire them, and more importantly, you want to invest in them. So therefore, if you have all three things like that, why not? That's the way to be.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Last question. I've actually, I don't know if I've ever asked you this because I look at it. I compare a lot of things to sports, as you know, and the all-time dream is to get an NHL, expansion team that I can build. But kind of similar to boards, if you could, because I look at this when I do searches, if you could build a board, let's say it's a new company, but they're going to grow pretty fast. They're going to be 5, 10, 15, 20. They're going to keep going up. If you could build a board from scratch, how would you build it?
So the first thing I do when I think about building a board from scratch, I'll look at the vision of the organization through the founder or founders and where they want to be in 3 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. The life of the board is finite, that you need to refresh it on a regular basis, not as a big bang, but let's say there's 5 directors, 2 retiring in 3 years, another one in maybe 5 years, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. I would look to make sure that the chair is effective, that they have the right industry experience, the right mana, as we call it, the right presence, the right patience to drive and support the CEO, and also monitor their role, but also monitor their performance, and more importantly, be there for them in tough times. It's a very lonely role to be a CEO. So you want, an avant-garde, progressive thinking chair. The rest of the directors will fill the gap around board composition and the skill set mix required to take the business next level based on their strategy. I think of a dream team of individuals that are passionate about the business, that are intelligent, that are humble, but prepared to work hard to win, like in the hockey team, but as a group, as a collective. You won't score a goal on your own as a center, but if you have the support of your other team players, you'll do very well and you'll score a goal and hopefully win the Stanley Cup.
I love it. New Zealand's talking to US here and we're talking hockey. It's pretty cool.
You want to talk about America's Cup in sailing and how we did really well?
Yeah, no opinion. That's an awesome sport. I don't follow it really well, but I have seen some of them up in the bay here in San Fran, and it's pretty cool. Well, I know you've been busy and business is good. It's great to hear that you and the family are healthy. Lovely having you for a revisit, and keep it going, man. And we'll talk to you soon.
Merci. It's a pleasure chatting to you as always, my friend. Have a great evening there in Los Angeles.
Mon plaisir, monsieur.